We're about to get into this episode, but before we do, I wanted to add a short intro because this was filmed before the update went out that the channel name will be changing. So I just wanted to say a couple of things, then we'll get straight into it. Firstly, I'm sorry I clickbaited you all. It goes against the no-ball approach to the channel that I tend to have. And secondly, thank you. The response was crazy. I recorded that video mostly for the benefit of people that watch regularly, so that when they see me disappear from subscriptions and appear as something else, they know what's going on, hence the clickbait. But the number of comments and the encouragement from you all was just unbelievable. So we'll start working through the comments and try and reply to them. You know I tried to reply to them all. There's over 100 at the moment. But I just thought if I add a short intro before I upload this video, then I can say thanks to you all face to face in a way. Lastly, I've recorded the first episode of the Ultra Profiles podcast. That's been done, and I'm expecting that to go out Sunday morning. So tune in for that if you can. And again, sorry for the clickbait, but if you see me out on the road, then you're welcome to all give me one Chinese burn each. That was about it really, so on to the video. I've been riding through the grimmest of British winter weather for about as long as I can remember now. While it can be pretty uncomfortable and cold out there, I have picked up a few things over the years that make it just about bearable. So I want to share with you 5 things that I've picked up over the years that you could put into action to enjoy winter riding and stay out there all winter. My name's Andy and I'm an ultra cyclist on a quest to be the best I possibly can be. I make videos about ultra training, kit and adventures with a fresh upload every week. I've got a long road ahead of me and I want to bring you along for the journey. Welcome to The Road Provides. Good morning friends, welcome back to the channel. If you haven't watched any before, hit subscribe for more ultra cycling related videos. And you guessed it, this one is about winter again. But then, let's face it, it's the middle of November. Here where I'm based, on the south coast of England, I can expect the temperatures to drop to anywhere from -5 to -10 degrees when it gets to its worst in January, maybe February. It is pretty nasty. And through a combination of trying different things and being given advice on events, I've managed to get together some pretty good hacks and some pretty good products to make the whole thing far more enjoyable and to ride through almost anything that this country can throw at me. If you're watching this and you're about to embark on your first winter season, hopefully this will help you get through without ending up in a dribbling, shivering mess, being wrapped up in a blanket on the couch by your other half, and enjoy the rides a bit more. But if you've got more experience than I do, a lot of you do, and there's a lot of useful hacks out there that I know that you'll all have. So please get involved in the comments for my benefit, if not everybody else's. Oh, winter is coming and I'm not ready for this. And whilst we're here, if you notice the new intro, the channel name has changed as well. This is the first video since I've rebranded after 1 year of doing this. If you didn't watch the video I put out on Tuesday, go back and watch that. Get a bit of a flavour for what this is going to be now. I'll forgive you if you're not really interested in watching that whole thing, but basically my original plan was make these videos for a year, regardless of results, see what happens, see what I want to do after a year. And it's been on my mind for a few months. What I'm going to do, I wanted to change the channel name for quite a long time. So that's changed, and the intro, pretty happy with that. Thank you, Rob. If you haven't watched any before, is it a vlog? Is it informational? Probably both, and neither at the same time. My plan for today though, just to get a solid endurance ride in the books. I've got something quite strenuous planned next weekend. As long as the weather isn't a complete crap out, then I want to save some energy for next weekend, and you'll find out what that is soon. But whilst I'm out today, yes, it's another video about winter, but a bit different. This is about how to be comfortable, warm, dry, all those lovely things that are really hard to master out road riding in the winter in the UK. I was thinking about this before I left this morning, and it's probably about as much forward planning as I tend to do. I'll try and separate this into 5 tidy areas, although I'll probably throw in a couple of bonus ones throughout. And and I'm currently about 20 miles in, so I should be about 60. So probably should crack on. So number one, the first thing I'm going to address, probably the most obvious big hitter item for you, save you skipping through the video, I know some of you do, staying warm. I mentioned earlier about shivering and shuffling through the doorway into your house, and your other half has to cover you in a blanket and try to warm you up. That has happened to me too many times. I put a picture up of a time I couldn't even get my shoes off, my gloves off. I just sat on the couch in the lounge and my other half wrapped a blanket around me like a little baby until I warmed up enough to actually do anything. It can get extremely cold in the UK, and wherever you're based, chances are, I know some of you Canada, worse, hopefully you're going to have some good hacks for us that translate. For me though, I find staying warm is almost the holy grail of winter cycling for me. Hitting that magic number and being perfectly warm and toasty throughout your ride is basically impossible. I think you can get pretty close. But what it comes down to is having a lot of different layers. Basically modularity. And let me just get this in nice and early. I don't have any sponsors. This is all stuff I've paid for, I've tested and tried. I'm not flogging anything to you in this video. But this may be new to some, not at all to others. The main thing you need to focus on is keeping your core warm. You might have cold hands, cold feet. I'll get onto that. I get extremely cold hands and feet. But you can help yourself so much by keeping your core nice and toasty. Your body is just trying to keep you alive. So if you're out in sub-zero temperatures, it wants that nice warm blood to circulate around your vital organs, keep you alive. It's not going to send that blood out to your hands if it's struggling to do that job. If you support the core and all of your core functions and organs, it will quite happily send blood out to your extremities and keep them warm. That's what's going on. Apologies if you know that already. I know a lot of people probably don't. So that's the first thing. Keep your core warm, wear a buff, maybe even a hat, because your head is going to leak hot air too. I'm classing your head as your core. It's very close to your core. Your hands and your feet are not. If you're follically challenged, or you can't grow a massive beard, then wear hats. Keep the heat in your head and your neck and your core, and I promise you your hands and your feet will follow. That being said, I know some of you watching this will say it's not quite as simple as that, and I know it's not. Whilst the weather is uncomfortable, that will work. As soon as you get into sub-zero and really, really uncomfortably cold conditions, no matter how well you insulate your core, your hands and your feet will start to freeze. For me, at that point, the only last line of defense is some really good gloves, overshoes, winter shoes. Essentially, trying to keep those as toasty as possible and encourage your body to send some blood that way. Think about your arms and your legs too. If you've got really good overshoes, really good winter shoes, but your knees are freezing cold, that whole limb is freezing, is your body likely to send blood that way when it's just going to get chilled out and chill your core down again? It's not. So you've got to think about your limbs too. So you're talking tights, leg warmers, bib shorts, combinations of things to try to get the right amount of insulation depending on the weather. Windproof coat like this one that's maybe going to keep your arms a bit warmer. Once you get to this point, you're just about doing as much as you can. It's a case of swapping out layers, taking your buff off, put it back on again, gloves on and off, all those kinds of things. Go to a cafe, warm up, drink a hot drink. There are ways of getting heat into your body and keeping it in there. I've had a lot of trouble over the years with cold feet. Someone told me in an Audax once, training for PBP, be careful with your feet. Once they get cold, once they go numb enough times, you damage the blood vessels in your feet. Circulation to that area is terrible, and it's very difficult to undo that damage. I didn't really heed that warning at the time, but I'm telling you, I'm paying the consequences nowadays. It's only got to go below 10 degrees and my whole feet are numb. My feet go numb so easily now. So if only a few of you hear this and protect your feet a bit better, I'll be happy. I've just had to invest in some Lake winter boots. And oh my God, they're amazing. But they cost me a lot of money, almost £300. I think with that sort of thing, there's an element of value. They're worth it, but expensive. Right now, my feet are nice and toasty. Before they arrived, numb. At this point, I'll give you bonus hack number 1. I had really cold hands for a long time. And eventually I thought, okay, let's try some liners. I went to Decathlon, bought some liners, glove inserts, £3 for the pair. And my hands went from incredibly painful to toasty warm. So, why I put that off for so long, I have no idea. For the sake of £3, go to Decathlon, get some of those gloves, and it will change your life, I promise. And number 2, if you find yourself out on a long ride, long way from home, freezing cold, never underestimate the power of plastic bags on your feet. I remember being on a ride and collecting up people's wrappers at a petrol station. A guy just finished eating his croissants. I took the bag, took a crisp packet, put them over my feet, and just about saved me. My feet, again, went from incredibly painful to bearable. That does work. A bit grim, but desperate times call for desperate measures. So, on to number 2, and that is staying dry. Arguably related to tip number 1, because if you don't stay dry, you're gonna get cold. And in my experience, the first thing I'll say on this, and you might disagree, when it rains, if you're out in the rain for long enough, or the rain is heavy enough, you're gonna get wet. There's no keeping it out. That's my experience. But for almost all cases when it rains, you can do a pretty good job of minimizing what gets in. I tend to find keeping my legs dry not so easy unless you're willing to wear full waterproofs, which I'm not. But as with tip number 1, the main concern for me is keeping my core dry anyway. With the wind chill and cold temperatures, as soon as your core gets really wet, you're a bit screwed. So I always carry a small, packable raincoat. I try to focus on being warm enough already through my other layers, but the small, packable raincoat as a barrier. So then if the heavens do open, I can do a pretty good job of staying warm. I tend to find I get a pretty good leeway of staying dry before the rain comes down my head, down my neck and into my jacket. So that tends not to be too bad. The main thing I struggle with, keeping the water out of my gloves. It's basically impossible. I have some sealskins gloves. They're quite old now, but supposedly waterproof. They never have been. Even if I get the cuffs of my jacket over the gloves, water still gets through them somehow. So while I can do a pretty good job of keeping my core dry and warm, I've got a pretty short window of a couple of hours maybe before the water gets into my gloves and my hands absolutely freeze. So actually, if anybody out there has got a hack or a really good set of gloves that really works, then please let me know. The only thing I've tried beyond that is plastic gloves underneath. That kind of works, but it's not really very practical, is it? We can call this hack number 2, I think, as well. If you do get stuck a long way from home, you get rained on, it's freezing cold, and your hands are absolutely numb, that's not good for your shifters and your brakes. As you pass petrol stations, pop in and look for the gloves by the pumps, because they often put plastic gloves out for people to not get petrol on their fingers. And if you really get caught out, some of those underneath your gloves will make a difference. Unfortunately for my feet, nothing I've tried has managed to keep them dry. If these new Lake space boots don't fix some of the wetness and numbness, then I am leaving this country. there you go, that is number 2. I'd say the fastest way to extract heat from your body is make it wet. Okay, I'm about halfway around my route now, so this would be a good time to talk about number 3. You can see a theme here, talking about staying dry again. However, not rain coming down from above you, the water that comes up from underneath you. You can be out on a day like today, which is relatively mild. It hasn't rained for a little while, which is annoying considering how wet the summer was. But most of the roads are dry. Every so often you go through an area, and if you don't have mud guards, you're screwed. In my humble opinion, mud guards give you the best value for what you pay in terms of comfort. I use SKS Bluemels. I forget what I paid for them, but it wasn't a lot. The difference in comfort is just huge. Even on a day when it rains heavily all day, because of the way the wind's blowing the water onto your front, the back of you stays fairly dry. So even when it's absolutely hammering with rain, my backside of my back tends to stay pretty dry. I fitted mine again recently, and a bit late to be honest. I went out a couple of times when the weather was really bad and got absolutely caked in rubbish, soaking wet, and just don't have a very fun ride. Mud gets everywhere, road grit all over your legs, everywhere. So if you can fit a set of full-length mud guards, take my word for it, it is worth it. Some people think they look ugly. Personally, I think on a traditional style bike, I think they look better. If you get full-length mud guards and you also add in long mud flaps, I think they look better. I also bought from a company called Raw Mud Flaps, long mud flaps that are reflective. So actually from behind, there's a long strip of white reflective material at the base of my wheel, so that was up as a safety feature as well. If your bike doesn't have mounting points for proper mud guards, then there's not a reason to not use them. There are mud guards that fix to the frame, to the seat stays, chain stays, whatever. I think these days, there's no reason to not be able to give them a go. If you really don't want to put on a full-length mud guard, get an arse saver. Even that's going to help you a little bit, but probably 5% of what a full-length mud guard will. The other added benefit of mud guards, if you do ride in a group, then you can feel better about yourself that you're not spraying couch in all your friends' faces. Although a lot of the people I ride with when I do couldn't care less. But for me, I can feel better about myself at least. Another added benefit is that all of what gets flicked up from the road onto your frame, your components, is bad for your bike. Salt, road grit, tons of it all over your bike. You've seen it. With the mud flaps, it's minimized hugely. Extend the life of your components as well. Climbing, if you can't tell. In my opinion, pay for themselves over and over and over again. And I've had my SKS ones for about 3 seasons now. Okay, we're into number 4 now, and once again, transitioning quite nicely from number 3. As I said, everything that's getting sprayed up onto your bike from the road is terrible for your bike, and it is costing you money little by little over time. So this tip is to service your bike. Might seem obvious, but how often do you do it? I do mine twice a year. Essentially, right now, as we're about to get into the wettest season, your bike is at a pretty high risk of corrosion and damage, which is going to cost you a lot of money over time. Before the winter season starts, I'll strip every single bolt off of this bike, remove, clean, grease, and put it back together again. Essentially what that's doing is making sure everything that should be able to be removed and move can still move, but adding in some grease to make it waterproof. If you add in grease to that thread, essentially water can't get in there until the grease is cleared out. Water getting inside those threaded areas is what's going to cause the damage and seize them up, so you can't remove stuff. I'm sure you've seen it with your Shimano brake calipers. You can't get the pads out because the little threaded the little nut is threaded and seized. So go check it, give it a little wiggle, make sure it can still move, because that's the worst one. I can see why this would be intimidating for a lot of people, but honestly, modern road bikes are really simple to work on. I can see mechanics get paid the big money, they work on all kinds of stuff, but a modern road bike is actually really simple. And all I'm doing is removing one bolt at a time, clean it, grease it, put it back in again, and torque it up with a torque wrench. You need a very basic tool set. Think about brake calipers. You can't misalign them because you just remove one bolt, clean it, grease it, put it back in, it doesn't move. If you work your way through the whole frame doing that, torquing things up when they need to be torqued, especially carbon, you can't really go wrong. Then as you need to do jobs to your bike, you just find things don't seize. I haven't had a seized bolt in so long. The only time I've been caught out is that Shimano caliper screw that seizes for everybody. I hate those little screws. When you get back from a long ride, cleaning all that rubbish off your bike is not the most fun of ideas. But I think if you just rinse it off, rinse all the salt off, the grit off quickly, put the bike away and clean it the next day, if you have waterproofed all those little areas, then you should be fine. That's worked for me for years now. I tend to build all my bikes myself from scratch, so I can tell you that job takes 2-3 hours. Really not a whole lot you can do to damage your bike. And whilst you're in there, you can clean behind stuff, clean your headset bearings, get that thing nice and happy. And I am back in Portsmouth now, a few miles from home, just in time for number 5. My number 5 is, don't be a martyr, don't be a hero. There's probably going to be points through the winter where it's just too bad to ride. It's so wet that you're going to freeze, so icy you're going to slip off and break your hip or your collarbone. Just dangerous. So just accept that at some point it might be too bad. Ask yourself if it is too bad, or if you're making excuses, but at some point it will be. So don't feel guilty about staying home, training another day, training indoors, because invariably at some point you'll be defeated. And personally, I'm not going out on the ice to skid off and break a bone, or to get absolutely soaked through just to prove a point. Don't fall into the trap of feeling like you've got to prove a point to people. Put a picture of your bike up in the snow on Strava. The reality is, you've got a lot more to lose than you do to gain. If you come off, you're going to be pretty annoyed by yourself. If you put the picture up, people are going to forget about it pretty quickly. Don't fall into that trap. As I'm sure you can tell from all the road noise back in the city and back home. So that's about all I've got on this one. If you watch this, you're about to start your first winter season, then good luck, keep at it. It's a really interesting time of year to be riding, but if you're an old hand at this, then please chip in. Anything I've missed, anything you can add for me, as well as everyone else, then please, especially the gloves. And thanks for watching the first episode of a new, exciting phase in this channel. So that's the end of this one. Quite a mundane ride today, but hopefully this helps a few of you. And next weekend, like I said earlier, if the conditions are good for it, I've got something particularly spicy planned. So hopefully see you for that one. So look after yourselves, have a good week. I'll see you all in the next one.